Another decade has gone by and it left us many incredible video games. Whether you played them on the PlayStation 4, Xbox One, the Nintendo Switch, the PC, or even the Nintendo Wii U, odds are there's simply one game out there that you absolutely love. But that being said, can you write down a list of top 5 games from the 2010s? It's no easy task, but we're going to try our best to do that in another exciting episode of A Cast of the Past with a brand new episode each and every Sunday. And the fact that we are in 2020 means that we have an entire decade to look back at, regardless of the console that you played, so we can celebrate these games. And we're going to try that with yours truly, Juan Velas from Puerto Rico, joining me as always from London, Ontario. We have Keith Hamilton now. Be real, man. How hard was it to work on a top 5 of the 2010s?
Oh my god. You would think that 5 games is easy, but it's so hard. My list started with 55 games, and I've somehow narrowed it down to 5. Woo. And even now, I'm like,
I can't remember 55 games I played.
Do you want me to list my top 55 games?
Let's introduce Ryan from Boston, Massachusetts. He's the other guy on the podcast. What about you? Did you have an easier time working on that?
I did, because I don't play as many games as you guys. I tend to go in on a couple games at a time and kind of keep it at that. So my list was I probably had just less to filter through than you guys, to be perfectly honest.
That's a possibility. And everybody, we put out a new episode every Sunday, and we love engaging with everybody. And thank you, whether you listen on Spotify, YouTube, anywhere, consider leaving a 5-star review. And we also have a Discord where we can live react to some of these games as we write down our lists. So that's acastofthepast.com/Discord. But I get the feeling that we're going to be talking about a lot of games, because the episode after this one, people, not only was it hard to pick 5 individual lists, the next episode, we're going to try to build a list of the top 5 A Cast of the Past games of the 2010s. So that's even going to be more intense. Yeah. So, Mr. McNulty, do the honors. What is your number 5 of the last decade?
Okay, so when it comes to my top 5, there was a few things I really considered. And one of the big things that you'll find with some of the games on my list is time investment. So number 5 for me is one where time investment certainly played a huge role, and that's going to be 2016's Pokemon Go. So that is a mobile game that is like this AR experience with Pokemon. I'm sure you've heard of it. It took over the world in the summer of 2016, and I am still playing it to this day. So a mobile game that you pretty much play every day, playing it for, 4 years at this point, that has to be on my top 5 games. A lot of people like to talk down about mobile games, but the fact that I'm still playing this mobile game to this day, I think speaks volume. Granted, you have the Pokemon property in there as well, and I'm a huge Pokemon fan, but I've never dedicated myself to a mobile game this long, not even close. Most mobile games I'll play for like a month and then I'm done. But the fact that I'm still playing this game, granted, not as heavily, a lot of that tends to do with the weather. Being in New England, you have colder weathers. I know Keith knows this with being in Canada, that it's not really as fun when it's really cold out, but during the summer, you're going for a walk anyway. It's nice to have some other reason other than just exercise and, the aesthetic of the outdoors, a little bit of extra motivation to keep you walking and staying outside.
I'm right there with you. This is a game that I've played on and off since launch. I'm like you. I live in Canada. Winter is cold. I'm not going to subject myself to the minus 30 degree weather just for a Tyranitar, even though I really love T-Tar. But it's just something I keep coming back to. I played Pokemon Go today. I had 20 minutes to kill. I needed to get up from my desk and just kind of reset my batteries. And so I went for a walk. I went to go get some Team Rocket stops taken care of. And it was a nice little break. Then I went on my way.
No, and I really appreciate that you brought that up, Ryan, because I think that in the online world, people are like, how dare you bring up a mobile game that's kind of a game, but not really. These are our individual lists. And look, the fact of the matter is, I remember when it first came out, it was an obsession with people, hundreds upon hundreds of gamers. So even culturally speaking, forget about video games, like pop culture shifted when that came out.
Yeah, let me tell you, like, the impact Pokemon Go had when it first came out was phenomenal. There was a company-wide meeting at my work when Pokemon Go came out, like the upper management basically pleading with people, like, does anybody know how to make our work a Pokestop so people will come visit us?
Wow.
That's amazing.
It was a phenomenon.
Yeah, and a lot of people like to say, oh, that game died or whatever. There was an event just yesterday, as of this recording, for Mincino. I don't know how to actually pronounce the poke. It's like a little mouse or whatever. But anyway, you have to spin Pokestops to get the reward. It was pretty cold out yesterday. And, I'm going out in, my suburban neighborhood. So it's not even like I'm in a big city. And there was plenty of people out there playing. So the game's still very much alive. And especially if you go into the city during an event, you are still going to see hundreds upon hundreds of people out there playing. So even though it's not like 1/5 of the population playing like it was at the start, basically, you still have hundreds and hundreds of people in every city playing this game every day.
So Mr. McNulty revealed Pokemon Go as his number 5. What about you, Keith? What's your 5th pick for your top 5?
All right, so I did my list a little differently, where it wasn't just about time investment for me, it was time investment against enjoyment. Like, if I only spent 40 hours with a game, but it was one of the most enjoyable 40 hours I had in the last decade with a game, then it went on my list, because I don't think that, like, the amount of trying to, like, suck every single penny out of a purchase of a video game, that's never been my thing. So my number 5 game is a great example of that. I'd like to take you all back to late 2011, where the world was just basically, I'm not going to say what I was thinking, that they were just getting excited over Skyrim. You can imagine what was about to come out of my mouth. But the world was getting excited about Skyrim. I thought it was all right. It's a great game in its own right. But there was another game that came out that everybody was like, yo, you need to play Saints Row the Third. They just went all out with this game. Saints Row is a game it's kind of like a Grand Theft Auto-like game, but they just they go for the wacky instead of the realism. And Saints Row the Third was like, how do we take wacky all the way to the extreme? Like, it was kind of going for that in 1 and 2. Like, hey, there was a mission where you had to shoot a poop truck at people, but we went from poop trucks to like giant hulking 400-pound naked men bulldozing, juggernauting their way through buildings. Or hey, let's get a giant dildo baseball bat and beat people up with it. And then just some of the things, you know what I mean, and just some of the things that they did in this game was so much fun. There's an entire it's a gang-based game, very much like a Grand Theft Auto, and there's an entire gang of luchadors where the culmination of that mission facing them is you inside of a wrestling ring having like a full-blown wrestling match against a leader of that gang. It's an incredible thing, and I think everybody should play Saints Row the Third.
Yeah, it is an incredible game. It is actually my list, but it's not my 5th pick, but spoilers. It is there because Keith is actually the person that persuaded me to play that game. You come up a couple times in here, Keith, so I owe you for my last decade. But a game that I wanted to bring up is number 5, which this changed even before this recording. I was still like debating, okay, do I really want this? Do I really want to have this here? And I think Ryan is going to completely understand, and it's not going to be surprising at all. But I'm talking about WWE 2K14. So I know that not everybody's a huge wrestling fan, but WWE 2K14 is the last wrestling game that I played that I really felt something special when I enjoyed it because of the roster, because of the actual gameplay. People always go back to WWF No Mercy, greatest wrestling game of all time, or SmackDown Here Comes the Pain on the PlayStation 2. But there was something about WWE 2K14 that it just clicked. Like, it wasn't an amazing game. Graphically, it was okay. Gameplay was okay. But everything about it was solid. Plus, you added the online component. I think that was super enjoyable. You had the Undertaker Beat the Streak mode, which you had to try to defeat The Undertaker, but he was like a video game character where he was always super cheap, hiding, turning the lights off, and that was just super enjoyable. And the servers for it went offline. I think it was like 2017 or something like that. And I played multiple wrestling games since then, and I go back to this one, and it's still a blast. So I don't think it's nostalgia talking. I don't think it's a matter of settling for a wrestling game. I really do think it's one of my favorites. And the fact that I was initially like, oh, do I really want a wrestling game to be my number 5? It's like, you know what? Yeah, because it's a freaking great game, right?
Yeah, I really like that pick, and that's a game I actually hadn't even thought to consider, but I love that you got it on the list, because I remember when this game came out, it was the first 2K wrestling game once the whole 2K purchase basically happened, and I was very weary of it because, you know, they were basically coming in at the home stretch to finish this game up, so I had no idea what to expect. But it basically took a lot of the cool things that WWE 13 had set up and really refined it and made it a much better experience. And yeah, Juan and I played a lot of online on this, and it was a ton of fun. So I'm really happy to see this make the list.
Yeah, wrestling games have been garbage for most of the last decade, and this is pretty much the only one I would say that's worth playing because, like 19 last year's was all right, but this is definitely the high point for wrestling games in the 2010s.
And Keith, that was already 2 years ago. It's 2020, man. Sorry.
Oh, you're right.
Time's flying by, yeah.
So I guess 20, yeah, the one I'm thinking of would be 20, right?
20 was garbage, though. Hell no.
No, okay, so it was 19. No. So what? Two wrestling games ago, yeah. Yeah, it's a good game.
It's okay, Keith. It's already been a decade. A decade's gone by. Ryan, God. Number 4, my friend. What you got for us?
All right, so number 4, I think it's a very unique game that it's pretty well known at this point. But I did want to kind of caveat what Keith was saying earlier. Time investment wasn't the only aspect I was rating a lot of these games. Just one thing I considered when overall thinking of my list. But number 4, certainly this game that does take some time and takes a lot of practice, and that is 2017's Cuphead, which I love this game because it is, in its true form, a platformer in a way, but not really, because yes, you have those side-scrolling platforming missions, but it is kind of more like a Contra gunner game. But you know, when you think of Contra, most of the time you're thinking of, you know, actually scrolling through the stages, but this game is way more about boss fights. There's only several run and gun levels, and the rest of it, you're just thrown right into a super difficult, gonna take you 50 tries.
That's an understatement. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. 50 or more, depending. I don't even know how many tries some of these bosses took, but these types of styles of games, albeit as frustrated as I get, the things I said when I played this game would be bleeped and probably get us demonetized if these videos were monetized on YouTube. So yes, there could be a lot of frustration, but I do like those games where you try, and then when you actually accomplish it, like that's a great feeling. I love that feeling, and Cuphead really captures that, and I had so much fun with it, and you can tell there was so much care and love put into this game with the art style and the amount of details and all the animations, because they're trying to replicate this 1930s cartoon animation style. And it really is just a beautiful, fun game with a lot of strategy elements too, because you can only use 2 types of guns basically when you go into each level, and there's multiple other types you can purchase. So trying to strategize what is the best combination of weapons to use at each stage. Some are much better in different stages than others, so there's that strategy aspect as well. So overall, I really love this game.
I have a question for you, Ryan. Have you ever watched a Cuphead speedrun?
I have. I know there's some really broken things you can do to kill bosses really fast.
It is one of the most phenomenal things I have seen.
It's crazy.
Yeah, I know there's some really weird glitches you can do in like older versions where your gun can be like super OP and stuff. But yeah, some of these bosses are ridiculous, and the second to last boss in this game is probably one of the most brutally unforgiving and hardest bosses I've ever challenged in any video game. He's even harder than the final boss, and yeah,
Oh, damn.
it's a hell of a game though.
I
I'll play
played
it one day.
like 10 minutes of it, died like 10 times in that, and I said, you know what? I appreciate people that play this game. I really do, but it's not for me. But Keith, what you
Yes.
got for number 4?
So this is a game that completely controlled my life for a very long time, and it might seem weird that a farming game is one of my top 5 games of the decade, but my God, do I love Stardew Valley. It's a game that I heard about through podcasts, like, hey, it's this fun farming game that actually gets really deep. So I checked it out, and then 1,000 hours later, I still think about Stardew Valley quite often. I own it and have beaten it, quote unquote, beaten it on multiple platforms, and it's one of those games where I just get in this zen-like mode where I think of a project that I want to do for myself, and then boom, it's all I think about. Have you ever had those games where you start playing it at night, and then all of a sudden you blink and it's like 3 a.m. in the morning? Stardew Valley is that game for me. And
Can you explain that for somebody that has no idea what the hell this game is? Because you say farming simulator. What does an average gaming session look like? You put the game in, what do you do?
So you're like the basic premise of this game is you've been given this farm by your grandfather, and then it's this plot of land that you can do anything you want with, and the cycle of the game itself happens in a day. So every minute is like an hour in a day, and then you just need to do everything you can before it gets to 2 a.m. or before you have to go to bed. And you can choose to either spend it farming, like you make crops and then sell them to get more money, and you have to make sure they're watered, and then eventually you can build up to sprinklers and build better crops, make barns, breed animals, and just go down this fun farming path. Or you can choose, like, I want to make a brewery. So, okay, now I'm going to make fields of hops, and then I'm going to make kegs for those hops, and then just make like mass amounts of beer and sell it for money.
And how does that make you feel?
Oh, it makes me feel so good. I love building the brewery the most in that game. But it's not the only thing you can do. There's almost like relationship quests in that game, and every single person in that game has their own, or like every single NPC has their own story built around it. So you can do or there's a goal of just like getting to max hearts relationship wise with everybody in that game. You can get married, have children. You can become a fisherman if you want nothing to do with the farming aspect. You can just become like this master fisherman and sell fish for money, or you can go into the caves, and there's like a combat angle to this game where you can just go into caves, try and get like minerals and diamonds, and
so you could do everything is what you're saying. Everything.
Really, for real. There's just like so many different paths you can take to the game, and you just get into this mode where you're like, okay, this is what I'm going to do today. My crops are going to be done in 3 days. That means I have 2 days to go mine. I have 1 day to go fish. So here's my week planned out. Okay, it's time to plant new seeds, start this new cycle. And it's one of those games where you just want like one more day. It's like, okay, if I do this, I can accomplish this in 3 days. So let's do 3 more days. Oh crap, well now if I do this, then in 2 more days I can accomplish this. And it just keeps like basically feeding into itself, and then all of a sudden time just disappears, and you've put 1,000 hours into this farming game, and you loved every single second of it.
Yeah, I was gonna say I have played it, and I think it really just takes a certain type of person to really enjoy it, because I did play it. I played maybe like 4 hours of the game, 4 or 5 hours. And I had my fun, but I kind of fell out of it real quick. It didn't suck me in. Even though I really like games like Animal Crossing, I don't know why this didn't grip me as much. I don't think there's nothing I didn't enjoy about it. It was just I wasn't as motivated to just want to keep playing it, I guess.
Yeah, it's understandable. It's a game that I initially started playing, but you know how much time it takes, right? So I look at somebody like Keith, and it's fascinating to me, but I also understand that it's a little intimidating. But for me,
It can be, for sure.
my fourth pick is the complete opposite. So Keith talked about a game that you can pour thousands of hours into and you probably won't finish. My game right now for number 4 is a game that I played and I beat in 2 sessions. I haven't played it ever since then, but it was that unique experience that I have with it that always has me thinking about it, and that game is A Way Out. So A Way Out is a co-op game. Whether you play it by yourself or something, it is always going to be split screen. What's super unique about this game is, say you buy it, and you're like, oh, well, I want to play it with Ryan, but then Ryan doesn't have it. You can actually invite your friend. They can download the game and play it online with you without having to buy a second copy. And that, to me, is just freaking awesome.
That's incredible.
So the entire premise is this. You're 2 men, and you have to escape prison. That is literally the game. Now, what happens and the personalities between them is truly amazing because one of them's a little bit more introverted, the other one's more extroverted, right? So it's this contrast of, well, what really happens and the decision-making process through this. It's in many ways sometimes a walking simulator where I played through the entire game with my wife, and we still talk about the entire experience because it's not often that you play a game that it is purely about decision-making. I will not get into spoilers, but you figure out with your creativity, you're 2 people trying to escape. So decisions need to happen at some points. And my wife and I have points where we'd be sitting down, we put the controllers on the floor or on a table, and we were like, so what the hell are we going to do? What's the decision? Like, do we want to go down the good route, the bad route? Because your character's an asshole, mine's not, but then maybe I'm the asshole? Like, it brings this entire conversation that I feel no other video game I've ever played has brought to the table. And the fact that you can beat it between 6 to 9 hours means that it doesn't overstay its welcome. So you're not feeling this sense of like, when the hell is this going to end? But there's little parts for those that had never played it. It's like you got to break out. So you have to go to a laundry room. But then one of you dresses up and then the other one is trying to take out the other person inside a laundry basket. So it's like those little things that you have to do in the game that sometimes there's not that many options, but it feels so freaking good. And I feel like this is a game that it came out in 2018, so it's not that old, that people just kind of forgot about. And I think it's a shame because a lot more games should follow through with it.
Multiple ways you can escape? Like different ways you can do it? Or is there only one way?
I'd say that more so than different ways, it is this style that it happens. Like eventually as you play the game, because sometimes you die and you got to go back, you realize like, okay, so I'm making decisions, but it's not these incredibly game-changing decisions, right? It's more like it sort of determines your ethical boundaries, like how far are you willing to go? Like if you were put into their spot, it's like the conversation. Usually, I never played the Telltale games, but I know Keith has. You're one person playing him, right? So if Keith wants to go down the bad guy route, nobody's stopping him. But because it's me and my wife playing together, it is the conversation that we both have about, well, I want to do this, but you want to do that. So it's like you actually become the characters in many ways. And that is the absolute definitive reason that I think people should play it. So once again, it's like if you haven't played it and you have a friend that you think this would be awesome with, you only need one copy, whether it's on the PS4, on Xbox One, and I forget if it's on PC, but please do yourself a favor and check this game out. I want to play it now. So, Ryan, number 3, what you got?
Okay, my number 3 pick, a very well-known game, and that is 2011's Dark Souls. Now, this is a game I stayed away from for quite a while, but my roommate and friend had always talked about it, loved it, and told me about it for years. And then finally I was like, you know what, I'll give it a shot. I saw, my other roommate playing it and it looked like a lot of fun. And I really didn't think this would be a game I would enjoy, but I really love this game. And again, similar to Cuphead, it is a very challenging old school
I'm starting to see a pattern in your list.
Yeah. Ryan likes some of that torture.
You're a masochist. That's what it is.
A little bit. Just a little bit. But this game, I really love the combat style of, really having to be patient and waiting for your time to strike in a lot of these boss fights, and even your everyday enemies, you have to be very patient. This is a game where it's like, oh, even when you start to feel powerful, don't take even the small enemies lightly, because if you put your guard down just because you think you're OP, well, sometimes you can get caught and end up dying when you got too cocky, basically. So this is a game that really rewards patience, and that's really the name of the game. But like, again, similar to Cuphead, that feeling of rewarding, there's a lot of games where you're just kind of, you're stringing through cutscene to cutscene, you're breezing through the game, you finish it, and you're like, oh yeah, I beat the game. It's just expected. It's an accomplishment to beat a game like this. And there's a lot of obscure things that, of course, sure, some things I looked up because there's some really obscure things, but there's a lot to discover, and a lot of people like to praise the kind of interconnected world that they have in this game. They don't really do this as much in the sequels to Dark Souls, but the original one, it's really cool too. You discover a new area, and then all of a sudden you realize you open a door or go down some stairs or something, and you're in an area you've already been in, and you see kind of how the world all fits together. It's an unbelievable experience that I think everyone, if they have to play one From Software game in the series, I think the first Dark Souls is really the best place to start. I haven't even tackled some of the other games, like Bloodborne, and I always mess up the name of the
Demon
samurai
Souls?
game. Or no, the samurai
Sekiro.
game, Sekiro.
Shadows Die
Shadows Die
Twice.
Twice, yeah.
Yes, those are some games I do want to get to down the line because I enjoyed this one so much.
Solid stuff. I played Demon Souls, the original one that a lot of people overlooked. And I played, I think it was Dark Souls 2. Died a lot, much like Cuphead.
Yeah, 2.
I'm good.
2, I never ended up finishing. I really don't like it as much, so I would suggest trying out Dark Souls if you're into that style, which I know Juan, you don't like as much.
Yeah. Keith, is your next pick a little bit on the torture side?
No. This is my favorite games of the decade. Why would I torture myself with them?
I mean, Ryan
I'm not a masochist like Mr. McNulty.
Yeah.
Yeah, number 2. Never mind. I had a joke. I'm going to keep it to myself. All right, number 3 is a game. This is probably the game that I've played the most this decade and enjoyed almost all of my time with. It's a game that I had followed basically from the time it was in closed beta. I ended up seeing like a GIF of it, thought, hey, this looks cool, got into the closed beta and have been hooked with it ever since. I became like a founder. This was before Kickstarter was a thing, so this is really the only game I've ever kickstarted, and that's Warframe. It's a PvE-based multiplayer co-op game. There is a PvP angle, but it sucks in this game where you just the idea of the game is you get these warframes that all have different abilities. I think there's nearly 30 of them, 30 unique ones in the game at this point, and then you just go on missions. There's different types of missions, like there's your classic just beat hordes of enemies and endless combat, or hey, you have a goal, you need to take out this spaceship, or you need to rescue this guy or capture this guy, and then just try to accomplish goals. And then it's very much like a grind style game. It's a free-to-play game where it's all about time versus money, where everything in the game is accessible, even to the point where you can earn premium currency through trading items and different equipment in the game, or you can just outright buy it. It's like, hey, I want to spend 10 hours farming this one Warframe, or I can just spend $15 and buy it. That's the entire pricing model of it, but they do it in a fair way, at least in my opinion, because everything is so accessible in this game. And it's not like hey, you need to grind 15 hours to get that currency that you would use to spend it. It's like, no, well, I ended up getting a really good drop in a mission. I can sell that for a third of the cost of this brand new item that just came out. I really like the balance that they've done with Warframe in that subscription model. Not really subscription, but I guess pay to play model. And they've just like non-stop added to this game. Like when it started, it was very much, here are those missions, go ahead and do them. But since it's come out, they've added a story mode, they've added story quests, they just added a thing where you like build your own spaceship and then have to like monitor all the systems of the spaceship. Like, are you going to be the pilot? Are you going to run the guns? Are you going to be like a strike team that goes and take out other spaceship? They've pretty much almost reworked everything in this game to make the combat keep up with times. Like, one of the big selling points of this gameplay wise is it's like has a very robust melee system. And that melee system started feeling long in the tooth. So all of a sudden they're like, okay, well, we're going to rework it. And now it works completely different. It feels like a modern action game, even though it's been almost out for 10 years at this point. Just the constant updates to it, the constant content updates to it, because there's always like a big thing that comes out every year or a few big updates that's just new content. It's kept Warframe fresh and awesome, and I'm always going back to it as just something I enjoy playing, catching up with, getting my time, leaving for a bit, and then coming back. It's like a cycle I've put myself in with Warframe.
And the game's out on pretty much everything now, including the Nintendo Switch. So if you want to play something like this on the go, I will say it's an intimidating game to get into. I tried to get back into it last year, and there's simply so much to do. Like, this can easily become your singular game experience. Like, you could just play this game all year only, and I know friends that have poured over 2,000 hours into it, and they're still like, oh, I'm working on something. Like, what? What do you do? What do you do eventually? But
I couldn't
Warframe.
Imagine trying to get into it at this point. I would say that's the one downside of it, is that even as somebody that has played it for almost its entire lifespan on and off, I'm always having to go up and Google, okay, how do I do this? How do I do that? And there are even like entire sections of the game I've never touched just because I haven't gotten that far yet.
So for me, this goes right back to Mr. Keith Poshik, who suggested I play a game. And this was now 2 years ago. Actually, oh my goodness, this was 2016. Wow, time's going by way too quickly. And there's a little game on the PS4 called Yakuza 6, The Song of Life.
Oh,
I have never played,
game.
Keep in mind, Yakuza 6, yet I had never played a single Yakuza game. So I had every reason going into it thinking, this is not going to be it for me. I don't know about the story. This is the sixth game. For anybody that doesn't know what this is all about, the easiest way to describe it is this. This is a badass simulator. You live in Camarocha, which is in a small town, small area. This is not an open world game. Initially, it does look like an open world game. So you're thinking, oh, it's like GTA or something. It's like, no, it is actually not that big. So you play as a particular character whose job is to just like kick the bad guys' asses. There's this incredible story about a baby, about a revenge story. This is almost like a soap opera mixed with a video game, mixed with dating, with eating. This game makes eating fun because whenever you get hungry in
eating
the video
was always fun. I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh yeah, no, but in video games, like nobody plays a video game and goes like, oh my goodness, it's so great. Because when you get hungry in the game, you can go to a restaurant, you can buy the food, and that actually increases your stats. So you're almost waiting to get hungry. As somebody that hates games like Ark, Survival Evolved, because I don't like the whole survival part, I love the fact that this game made everything that I usually do not like about a game and makes it awesome. Plus, the actual fighting system. You can grab pretty much everything around the character. You can go to an arcade. This game is made by Sega, so you can play games like Outrun. And the best part is, like, if you like this game...
Virtual Fighter 4. Like, my God.
Virtual Fighter 4. You can play freaking Virtual Fighter 4. And if you like this game, once again, it's the sixth game. The best part is they've actually been remastering the older one. So, like, on the PS4, you can pretty much play all of them. This year, I'm hoping to play Judgment, which is like this game mixed with Phoenix Wright. I have my copy there. My wife gave it to me as a Christmas gift. And I'm like, what? You're mixing this incredible, outrageous experience. Keith, I do got to bring it over to you. What made you love this game?
I saw a video online of Yakuza 0, of just like you said, of the over the top badass simulator aspect of it, of like, hey, you're in this street fight against a bunch of guys and then you just took somebody's head and curb stomped it up against a bike rail, and then that's just the game goes on. Now you're pouring
And
salt in
afterwards,
people's
you
eyes.
sing karaoke.
And then you go sing karaoke 5 minutes later and you're doing a side quest where you're trying to be a mascot for somebody. It's just, Yakuza is so good at riding this line of like serious drama and just insanity. Because all of a sudden you're doing these crazy fights. You're in the middle of this giant murder mystery where you're fighting for your life, and then you're having a dance off with a bootleg Michael Jackson. And that's kind of Yakuza in a nutshell right there. Yep. And at least the ones I've played 0, 1, 2, and 6. And I'll be playing the remasters as they come out, but they're just so good at riding this line. And then just, I've never played a game that is better at tying everything together. Like, by the time you're in the middle of a Yakuza game, there are like 100 story threads that are out there.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It's insanely complex.
The one thing I got to point out there is like, don't worry about a game not sort of closing the story. This game almost does too much of that. You know what it's
hell
like?
Or high water.
Yeah,
it's
the game's
almost
like,
too
hey,
clean.
just in case you're not sure, just in case, here's some more explanation. Oh, that's not clear enough. Here's even more explanation about the story. And
yeah, they
just
hit
in case,
Kojima levels of
more.
explanation at some points.
It is ridiculous. Also, what the hell at the end of the story? Please do yourself a favor. Play this game. It is freaking awesome. Now, Ryan, we only got 2 more games on this list. What is your number 2 pick?
So, my number 2 pick, I would say I have a bit of a complicated relationship with, because I no longer play this game anymore, and I really don't have any interest in playing this game anymore. But the sheer amount of time that I was hooked to this game,
I know what you're going to say.
It must be on this list, and that is Hearthstone, which came out in 2014. I was playing this in beta, basically before it even released. So I was playing this as early as late 2013. And I already, Keith and I, we both love the Warcraft universe. I used to play Yu-Gi-Oh cards back in the day, so I had a little bit of a card game background. So when you combine, card games plus World of Warcraft, I'm going to check it out. I'm pretty sure Keith was the one that told me to check this out, and he got me into it, and he helped me, learn to play in everything L2P.
Could you explain, like in an elementary way, some of the gameplay mechanics for those that haven't played a trading card game?
For those who have not played a trading card game, the way Hearthstone works is you essentially have monster cards and spell cards, and as does your opponent. You build a deck with, I think it was 30 cards. I can't even remember at this point, but
it is.
Okay, you have a combination of these monsters and spells, and you'll put your monsters on the board, and you're trying to basically get your opponent's points to 0, their life. But there's also other monsters you can attack on the fields. And yeah, it goes until one player dies. But there's a lot of strategy that goes into it. It's essentially like a more complicated game of chess with a lot more factors involved. So I was very much into this game for basically 3 straight years. I was playing this game all the time, and I was very much hooked into this game. So for that, I have to put it on my list because it was a game I did really enjoy for a very long time. As frustrated as I would get it sometimes, I played ranked a lot. So it was one of the games. I'm normally not a very competitive person at all. I'm usually pretty bad at competitive games.
And after watching your Hearthstone career, thank God you're not a competitive person.
Yes.
Yeah, let's just say Ryan used to stream.
Ugly.
And if Ryan was playing Hearthstone, you went on Twitch and you saw his damn streams.
Yeah,
for the yelling.
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, I get angry. I have a temper when it comes to video games.
Oh yeah.
Just a bit. But I took ranked pretty seriously, although, I mean, I only got to the legend rank once, but that was definitely an accomplishment to be able to get to that rank. But there's a whole aspect of like ladder anxiety where it's like if you lose a game, you lose your rank, and there's a lot of stress that goes into that. But I was happy to at least do that once. And yeah, I got to give it a lot of credit. Like I said, it was the most I've ever been dedicated to a competitive video game, as RNG based as it could be at times. So all credit to them. I basically haven't touched the game in about a year and a half, and really kind of fell out of it after the Frozen Throne expansion pack. It just ended up being too expensive. My interest level versus the level of wanting to still commit money to it just completely fell out of whack, and I couldn't stay into it anymore. Had to step away, but it's probably for the best for my health.
Yeah.
Agreed. At least your
friends
heart.
and yeah.
Yes.
So we went from a card game to now, Mr. Poshik, what's on the menu?
Mr. Hamilton.
Yeah, Mr. Hamilton.
dude,
Jesus.
I'm sorry.
It's been months at this point.
Oh, okay. Let me pull up
There
for
you
the
go.
video
There it
version.
is.
Even says what's your Twitter, Keith?
Follow
what's your
me on Twitter at Hamilton by Law, because I legally changed my name to Hamilton, even though that kind of makes me sound like a lawyer.
For like, Jeeves, man, over 10 years. Give me a break sometimes.
Yeah. Of the last decade that we're speaking of.
That is very true.
That's true.
And speaking of that decade, what's your number 2?
So this one's going to be quick because I've spent most of my time on this podcast gushing about the RE2 remake and how it has taken one of my favorite games ever in the original Resident Evil 2 for the PlayStation and just made it better in a way that I couldn't even wrap my head around. I knew it was going to be good. I had no idea it was going to be that good. And it's just something that I'm so thankful it exists. I'm so thankful that it's really set this new bar for remaking games. It's a bar that, I mean, it hasn't come out yet, but it feels like the Final Fantasy VII remake is getting pretty close to that. And I'm just excited for what this means for remakes going forward. And the fact they just did that with one of my favorite games was one of the most enjoyable experiences I had of the last decade. Even though it was very near the end of the last decade, I loved my time with RE2 so much that it's very, very high on my list.
No, same here, man. I think that is the definitive way. We've talked about that. You know, this year we have the RE3 remake. We also have like some, like the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon DX. We're getting remakes and remasters of like older games. But I think this game right here is always going to sort of set the standard.
It's the
for
gold
that.
standard. It's the Terminator 2 of remake video games.
yeah, that's always going to be the reference now. But at number 2, this is a game you talked about already, so I'm not going to dedicate too much time to it. But it is Saints Row the Third. The reason that I made my number 2 is that this game came out in 2011. And being perfectly honest, I'm not an open world type of person. I love a linear experience that's like tailor-made. You know, this is how a game wants you to feel. Kind of like a movie. Ideally, I like to play games that are like 8 to 10 hours in length, but something about this game, the outrageous nature, the only other open world game that I played and loved every second of it was Infamous, and I think there's a lot to tie in together, even though you're not a superhero in this game. Let's be real, you kind of are, even though you're like the anti-hero, I guess you could say, but everything about it, from the costumes to the fact that you can do some co-op stuff, the wrestling moves. You know, I talked about WWE 2K14 previously. You know, with this game, there's a ton of wrestling references in it. You even have Hulk Hogan, which, let's not talk about Hulk Hogan, but there's a wrestler in the game, and I think that's pretty special. So that's why that became my number 2. Now, before we begin to unveil some of the number 1 games of all time, we went over to our Discord. Once again, that is a casttothepast.com/Discord. And we asked a couple of people, hey, going back to memory lane, what are some of your favorite games of the last decade? We have Travis, who wrote that Life is Strange is my favorite of the last decade. Did any of you play that game?
I did not, but I want to so bad. It's up there as far as like great episodic games, and I know that about it. And as somebody that's a fan of the Telltale style of game, I need to get around to it. It's very high on my list with Cuphead.
Yeah, so it's a story-driven game. It's a lot about decision making. Haven't played it myself either, so can't talk too much about that. But Ace Bunny had a couple of different picks. Not a top five, but some games I really like this decade or the previous one include Alan Wake, Rayman Legend, Octopath Traveler for the Switch, Super Mario 3D World for the Wii U, Mario Kart 8, and Breath of the Wild. I think that Breath of the Wild is on a league of its own. So out of the other games, is there any of these that you played and you also enjoyed?
So I didn't necessarily play any of these, but I remember Alan Wake was an interesting game that I remember hearing a lot about, and I meant to revisit because it definitely had some kind of Silent Hill-ish aspects to it that kind of piqued my curiosity. So that's something I might have to go back and check out because that kind of fell off my radar.
I'm just doing a quick Google. Okay, so Mortal Kombat 8 is Mortal Kombat Armageddon, right? Because MK9 is the 2000 or like the remake, right?
Maybe? I'm not a Mortal Kombat guy, so like,
okay,
where are you going with this?
Because if I am correct, I don't really have a lot of reverence for MK8, but my god, do I love MK9. It's a game that it was on my 55 game list at one point, just because of how amazingly they did that fighting game story. It is really the beginning of like the renaissance of fighting game stories, and how they were able to take these three Mortal Kombat games from the Sega Genesis Super Nintendo era that everybody loves and just make a great story mode out of it and have very solid competitive gameplay around it. I loved MK9, and I agree with you. Breath of the Wild's kind of in a league of its own. I would argue that it should be high on a overall games of the decade list. If you're talking about like just video games that are incredible and kind of moved the platform forward, Breath of the Wild should be at the tippity top of that list. But it's our games of the decade, not the games of the decade.
You know what I love about all of this? I am 99% sure he was talking about Mario Kart 8. So I'm just like, keep going, Keith.
Yeah,
keep going.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Mario Kart 8. Oh, yeah. MK,
like,
Mario Kart, Mortal Kombat.
That's why I was so confused. I'm like, why the hell is he talking about Mortal Kombat?
Yeah, totally. That makes a lot of sense.
So Mario Kart 8, everything that Keith said, just Mario
Kart 8 is a great game.
You know when Luigi siphons souls out of toads and then transforms into them? It's my favorite part of that game. Wow, I didn't even put that together, but goddamn, MK9 is great.
My only issue with Mario Kart 8 was that it was such a solid game that I feel like on the Nintendo Switch, they have it. Where's the Nintendo Switch Mario Kart? That's all I'm saying. They're coasting off of Mario Kart 8, which is a fantastic game. But
the sad answer is go pay $20 and play this generation's Mario Kart on a phone. $20 a month, I should say.
Oh, hell no.
Boo.
Hell no.
Boo.
I hated that option. But just to keep in mind, like before we get to our number one, so many games that came out this past decade, like Borderlands 2, Grand Theft Auto 5, like it or hate it, I mean, Minecraft, Fortnite, PUBG, so many things happened in just the last decade. There are forgotten games like Titanfall 2 as well, so it's just worth pointing out that it's easy to just forget how many games came out in a 10-year span, which brings us to our number one picks, beginning with Mr. McNulty. What you got?
Probably, if you've listened to me in the past talk about games, this probably is the least surprising number one ever. But it is Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, which came out in 2017. This was, Keith had just mentioned it, and it was mentioned by, our listeners. I'm a huge Zelda fan, but after a game like Skyward Sword, which came out in the earlier part of the decade, it was kind of a letdown, and it really felt like the series needed to be redefined. And then in 2017, they did just that with Breath of the Wild, which just made exploration in a game one of the most fun things ever. I've said it before, and I think IGN said it in their review of this is a game that never tells you no. If you see something there's likely a way that you can get there or accomplish what you think you could accomplish. There's a lot of kind of physics that makes sense, and you can do some really cool things in this game, but I rediscovered my love for single player games because of this game. Hearthstone was earlier on the list, Pokemon Go. Those were games I was kind of just playing, and I was kind of avoiding single player games for a while, and I was playing other games like Overwatch. And then Breath of the Wild came out, and all of a sudden, I play this game. I love it so much. I start playing games like Dark Souls, like Cuphead, like Skyrim, and really getting into those games as well. I kind of fell off and was kind of done with single player games for a while until Breath of the Wild. So I owe it a lot. And I'm just a huge fan of the Zelda series as is. So for them to just have this kind of rebirth of the series was without question the number one game for me.
Mm-hmm. Breath of the Wild really is just like a breath of fresh air into the Legend of Zelda franchise, especially after something like Skyward Sword, where it became very old, tired, and just kind of going through the motions of what you think a Zelda
Literally
game should be.
Literally going through the motions because it was a
the
motion
Wii.
control game.
Get it?
Yeah.
But I consider Breath of the Wild to be the most non-linear linear game ever, where you have your objective. It's a single player game. You know your base goal. They literally give it to you within the first 5 minutes of the game. Your main objective: beat Calamity Ganon. It is on your quest log since the beginning of the game, and it can take you upwards of 20 minutes if you know what you're doing, or it can take you 100 hours. And then just the way that they have such a non-linear approach to every single aspect of that game. Like, they kind of do away with the old conventional dungeon methods of Zelda and move towards shrines. And even though there is a way to solve every single shrine, there are also ways to game it and get to the solution of that shrine, because I guess I should say a shrine is like a little puzzle that's very it's like, hey, this is the area that's laid out before you. There is a puzzle to solve this puzzle, and then you win. You're on to the next one. Even though they have a set solution for it, there are ways to game it and still make it work.
Yeah, it really...
And it makes you feel so good.
And
you feel really smart because
like Einstein.
There's no one solution to everything, and people have gotten extremely creative, and I'm sure people are still discovering new ways to solve multiple puzzles and get further in the game and accomplish certain things. I mean, you can chop down a tree and basically surf on a tree log, and that's a legitimate speedrunning tactic because of one of your abilities to basically stop time, add momentum, and then when the timer runs out, that thing gets propelled forward. So people have basically surfed on tree logs across the map. So
That's
you can get
amazing.
very creative with this game.
Just like Cuphead, this is another game that it's so fun to go watch speedruns of.
Yeah, it's interesting. Ryan, as a gamer, I feel like, I've known both of you for well over a decade. You definitely love the challenge. If you focus on all the games you've talked about, they have that common theme of challenge. They can't just hand it to you on a silver platter. You like to struggle a little bit, Mr. McNulty, don't you?
Mm. Yeah, just a little bit. I don't get me wrong, I like the Uncharted's and all that, but the games that really stand out to me are certainly ones where you have that large sense of accomplishment for having gone through the game.
So having said that, Mr. Hamilton, could you do us the honors and present us your number one favorite game of the last decade?
It's kind of funny because if I could pick a game that is the polar opposite of Breath of the Wild, as far as like non-linear story-based games, it would be my number one game of this decade. Let me take you back to a time. It was around 2010 when there was this little company called BioWare, was still good. They were putting out phenomenal games, phenomenal story-based games, and this little series was kind of at the top of their mountain called Mass Effect. It is a 3-part space opera, very much akin to Star Wars, Star Trek, and Mass Effect 2 is the highlight of that franchise. Not only that franchise, I would say it is one of my favorite games ever. Throughout history, Mass Effect 2 is definitely in my top 5 of all time, and just the way that this game is character building 101, where it's all about the different stories and interactions. Like, it did kind of move the gameplay of the Mass Effect series forward, because I'll be honest, the gameplay in Mass Effect 1 is garbage. It's going back to it is a awful experience. Mass Effect 1 is a game where I would recommend you put it on easy just so you can see the story, because the story's great, and then just getting through it just so you can play Mass Effect 2, because it also did this cool thing of there was a trilogy-like progression that we hadn't really seen before in games, where the BioWare games are very choice heavy, where you're kind of making like big decisions in those games that affect the story and the plot and the characters. All the decisions that you made in 1 carried over into 2, and it was a very unique concept at the time that BioWare was known for. And the premise of Mass Effect 2 itself is, okay, you have this mission that you need to accomplish. You're going up against the odds. You're basically like the John Cena of space, and you need to build this team that will help you overcome these odds. And then, being the middle chapter of the game, it gives it room to breathe and really focus on these characters, this suicide squad that you're building of the most dangerous outlaws, the smartest people in the galaxy.
Jared Leto in it?
Yes, Jared Leto's in it. You shoot him in the head 5 minutes in. And you don't actually do that. But then you're just building these relationships with these characters to the point where they will follow you on this suicide mission that leads into Mass Effect 3. And even though you've spent 60, 80, 100 hours getting attached with these characters, they can die. There is a chance that your favorite character might not make it to the next video game if you make the wrong choices, and the consequences of that just lead to this very powerful and epic final chapter in this game, going into that suicide mission that you've been building up. And that large scale mission combined with like these small scale character interactions just makes Mass Effect the perfect character developing game. Now, BioWare has gone kind of down the toilet at this point, and I don't think that magic really exists anymore. And I'm one of the people that will defend Mass Effect 3. I thought it was fine originally, but just if you're talking about the peak of BioWare video game, Mass Effect 2 is that peak, and I love it so much. Everybody should play the Mass Effect trilogy. Take Andromeda, throw it in a toilet, just play Mass Effect 1, 2, and 3.
And something I wanted to say about that, when you say suicide mission and what happens, that's not even a spoiler. The entire premise of the game is you're trying to build up the team. Yeah, exactly. So I love the fact that much like Breath of the Wild, I guess in that sense, you can say it's like the game starts letting you know this is the thing. How you get there and what you choose to have and not have, that's entirely up to you. And interesting story is that you got me into Mass Effect 2 as well. It's not on my list here, but it was the fifth pick
during this episode.
Yeah, because it's like I feel like even though we play a lot of similar games, just not at the same time. So it's like I'm playing something that you're gonna play, or vice versa, but not at the same time. And when I played that game, I was hooked. And I do not play. I've talked about this here. It's like I don't play games that are super lengthy. But there was something about just like sitting down, getting to understand the characters. I failed miserably at the end of the game. So I got one of the worst endings possible, and I was pissed off, but it's so unique, and I love that game so much. So without further ado, I guess it's up to me. So Juan,
you're the last one.
Can you present us with your number one game of the last decade? And I think that anybody that's either subscribed to my channel or you've heard me talk about this game, I feel like I have an obligation to talk about this game, and that is Dead Cells. So this little game, I own 3 copies of on the Switch, on the PS4, on PC. I also play it on Game Pass. I continue to make progression in each one because there's something about it. So this is the roguelite genre. You video gamer out there, or even if you don't play video games, you may be, what the hell is the difference between a roguelike, roguelite? A roguelike is the type of game that when you die, you start from scratch. Best example, Binding of Isaac. You start that game and you don't have any permanent upgrades to continue to progress. A roguelite is a game that you do have to start all over when you die, but you do have permanent upgrades. And that's where this game came in, and I fell in love with it. I played over 30 minutes of it. You have a side-scrolling 2D game with beautiful sprites. And the whole thing is that you have long-range weapons, you have short-range weapons, but the fluid animation and how you actually play, this is the type of game that if you die, you know it's your fault. You know how sometimes you go like, oh, the delay or something's not working. And it's like, no, if you die, it is entirely because you did not master the dodge mechanic, because maybe you didn't get the right upgrade. And when you progress, you have an accessory so you can throw down arrows that support you. And it's just this entire thing that, not about the story, I can tell you anything about it, really. But it's the one game that when I went to bed, I would actually bring the Switch with me because that was the main version that I played to continue playing. I haven't done that with any other Switch game. Like the Switch is portable. I never played in handheld mode in my home, but I did it with that game. So if you're looking for something that is just going to get you coming back time and time again, it's a game that's fun to play with your friends because they want to see you thrive. They want to see how far can you make it. I actually ended up beating the game. I was going to do a video for my channel, so I'm like, I guess I'll record some footage. All of a sudden, I'm like, wait a minute. I'm like getting farther. I beat the game in that sitting. I went from like, I was going to record 10 minutes of footage to playing an hour and a half of it. And I yelled. I flat out yelled when I actually beat the main story. Now, there's like a hard mode, which is just kicking all kinds of my ass, but I beat the normal difficulty. That makes me feel pretty damn good. And that's why Dead Cells, to me, is my number one favorite game of the last decade. Did either of you play it? I forget.
Yes, I'm with you where there was a point in my life where this just consumed me, and it was all about just like getting the next upgrade. And like you said, just the controls in this game are so tight and so precise that every time that you die, you never go like, well, the game screwed me over. It's 100% on you. And it's just so great because you feel yourself getting better. There's not a lot of games out there that you can't just like brute force after a while where, oh, hey, you're stuck on this part. Well, I'm going to go grind a bunch of skill points, get super powerful, come back and just steamroll my way through it. That doesn't really exist with Dead Cells because even though you do get upgrades, and some of them are just like, hey, I get more health or I get more potions that I can do to heal myself, all the upgrades are kind of like flat line where it's just different ways to approach a situation and different styles of gameplay that you can see if you like or dislike. There's not really something that just makes you stronger. The way that you get better in this game is by doing exactly that. You get better. I say that with the exception of the final boss, because the final boss in that game is bullshit, and that's just not fair.
That final boss that's one of the situations that if you don't have the right accessories and secondary
just
items,
throw in the
you
towel.
just get...
There's a pit, just jump in that pit, because you're done.
But it's a great feeling, and just to cap it off, is there any game that you would like to mention, kind of like an honorable mention, or just something that's like, look, this game was on my list before Juan forced me to send the damn list, so I wouldn't keep changing it. Is there anything like that for you guys?
You brought it up when you were talking about Dead Cells, but a game that is probably, it is like my 5.5 or 6 of this decade is The Binding of Isaac, where I started playing the Flash version of The Binding of Isaac. It was really one of the first games that I got into on Twitch, watching Twitch and seeing different runs of that game because of the roguelike aspects of it where every run is different, and then just trying to get good and and complete the game on my own. It's a game that I sunk a lot of time into and enjoyed most of my time with. I love The Binding of Isaac, and they just kept upgrading it throughout the decade, because then they came out with The Binding of Isaac Rebirth, and then Afterbirth, and then they've started adding mod packs, and then the community has kind of run with it.
I have played the board game. There's a board game of it now, and it's actually a lot of fun. So I would say go check it out. But yeah, Keith got me into the Binding of Isaac as well. I'm not nearly as good as Keith. I never unlocked everything, but it's still something I think about going back to a lot.
Baby.
Yeah. But there, a couple honorable mentions certainly. I mean, Minecraft is certainly one that I enjoyed. Another one, Heavy Rain, kind of similar to what Keith was talking about with Mass Effect, where characters could actually die at some point in the story. But that was very much like QuickTime events that are good. QuickTime events was like a thing that people didn't like for a long time in games, but then they based an entire game around it, and it was like playing out a movie, and I thought that was very interesting. And of course, the game that's been remade about 7 million times, Skyrim, I finally beat the main story of that game for the first time about a year ago.
That's amazing.
Damn.
Yeah, and I had so much fun with it, just going with my like stealth version and just daggering people and getting that 15 times bonus attack on them. It's OP and it's amazing. So Skyrim's a great game too. I mean, how can you not at least honorably mention it for the decade? I mean, it's been released 70 times, so
it's on everything.
Yeah, it really is. It's incredible. And I'm feeling pretty good about this. I think that it's a nice contrast. I think that each of us, that's why I love working on this podcast. We have some similarities. I'd say that when it comes to video games, if you guys and gals listening and watching were curious as to like, sort of what we like, I think this gives you a flavor of that. I think that Keith and I, we like some similar genres in a broad stroke, but then Ryan and Keith, like when they love a game that is like-minded, that is the game, right? Like with Hearthstone, Binding of Isaac, WoW, when you two play that, it's like that is the only thing that you play.
It consumes my life, hence Stardew Valley.
Guys, I'm going to say something that I know for a fact you have not processed, and it's going to make you feel old as hell. The next time, if we do this type of episode on the podcast, we will be about 40 years old. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Woo. How does that feel?
Not good.
Feels bad, man.
Oh man, I got chills saying that right now. So everybody watching and listening, please, if you're on YouTube, as Keith recovers, let us know what are some of your top 5 favorite games of the last decade. You can also subscribe to the channel. If you're listening on the road, first of all, park, go to the right side, pull out your phone, leave a 5-star review on
Unless
Spotify,
you're in England,
Stitcher.
and right, wouldn't you go to the left side maybe? I don't know.
Well, yeah, I don't know. Whichever the safe side is, please go there and leave a 5-star review. How confident are both of you feeling on the road to the next episode, where we're going to take these 15 games, or technically, I mean, it's less because we had some similar ones between Keith and myself, and we're going to take a 5 list. There's going to be some debating, I think.
Oh,
We'll
yeah.
be masters at it.
Yeah. Ryan, you okay?
I'm good.
I'm still rocked by that revelation you said. My God.
Right. I just thought about that now. I thought I would just throw it out there, but I love working on this episode. So
this is where people are going to get triggered because games will be cut.
Oh yeah, I'm anxious and ready for that. So please go over to the Discord. That is acastofthepast.com/Discord. React. Let us know. Out of the 3 of us, which gamer do you relate to the most? That's going to be quite the interesting question. So up until next time, this has been another exciting edition of A Cast
to the
Past.
Keith, I feel like Ryan and I, we need to thank you. The common thing is like, Keith got me to play this game.
Yeah, next video, top 5 games Keith recommended to me.